welcome everyone. My name is Lucia. I'm representing Green Hospitality. We'll be your host for today. And we are connecting on our first happy hour talk of 2021. It will be a talk about the green recovery for the hospitality industry. And our guest today will be Anna Zhan from the Swedish Chamber of Commerce. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us, Anna. And I will introduce Anna a little bit. Anna is a vice chair and project manager at the SwedCham Sustainability Committee. Anna is a strategy consultant specialized in sustainability. She works for the Swedish government's trade promotion agency, helping sustainable and innovative technologies find business opportunities in Hong Kong and mainland China. She specialized in sustainability reporting with previous experience from Big Four, investment banks, and holds a master's degree in accounting and financial management from Stockholm School of Economics. So that's the guest for today. And if it's for the first time that you are connecting with the Green Hospitality on the Happy Hour talk, I just would like to say that this is supposed to be a little bit of a casual talk. So I hope that you have your drink with you. Got this one today. So feel free to open your bottle of beer or have your tea or smoothie. We're gonna have a talk about something that we are passionate about, which is sustainability, thinking about the outlook to the future for the hospitality industry, what all the things that are happening around us mean, but it's not a formal way. We are not going to try to educate you on some hard data. It's more of a conversation. We have prepared some questions with Anna that I'm going to introduce, and then we will have a conversation so you can listen in, but we encourage you to also pose your own questions. So our team here, Carrie, Karen, and our assistants, our interns at Green Hospitality, and they will be monitoring the chat. So if you would like to pose some questions or just even say hello, where you're connecting from, or have any sort of inputs for the conversation that we will be having with Anna, feel free to share. Many times we have people sharing interesting links to articles, etc. So, help us out to create a knowledge sharing space for all of us, and also pose your questions. We will be monitoring the chat, and towards the end of the talk, we will have a Q&A session. So we will be able to respond to the particular questions that you have towards the end or throughout, if we see that it's only relevant to a specific thing that we're talking about at the moment. So otherwise, for those of you who are first time hearing about Green Hospitality, we are a nonprofit organization based in Hong Kong, and we are a platform for hospitality businesses, hotels, airlines, F&Bs, or supply chains to really share knowledge. We do that through research or through these kind of events. We are also connecting different partners. We do that through other different kind of tools, either introductions or our think tanks. And then we look for solutions together. So we are designing different solutions that stem from research and knowledge sharing and deep partnerships. So hopefully you're going to have a great time with us. And now I'd like to welcome Anna and let her say hello to you.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and what a pleasure to be here with y'all. So excited about this talk and having a happy hour, even though it's virtual with all of you. I'm representing the Swedish Chamber of Commerce and the Sustainability Committee. I am Swedish by birth, born and raised in Sweden, and I have family from southern China, so I have the luxury of speaking both Cantonese and English here in Hong Kong. And I'm working for the Swedish Trade and Invest Council as a consultant, so helping Swedish companies that want to expand and enter Hong Kong. And many of those Swedish companies are sustainable, they have very sustainable solutions. So it's really exciting to be part of this whole arena here in Hong Kong in different aspects. And hospitality is a very important industry for us as well. There's many Swedish companies that are present there. And as also from a consumer perspective, it's always very interesting to be part of that and see what's going on. And it's all about experiences and how to live your lifestyle. And it really touches upon so many people's hearts and get people really engaged. So I really like this topic.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much for being here with us, and let's jump into it. So we shared before this talk, obviously, a few topics and what we could talk about and how you could actually enrich our knowledge with regards to hospitality industry and green recovery. And so I know that the SwedCham has launched the Hong Kong's Business Climate Survey in 2020 to sort of look for preparedness or interest of the companies in sustainability and how ready they are to commit to sustainability in their operations, specifically here in Hong Kong. And you have also published a position paper with some recommendations to the government on how to achieve the goals and the carbon targets that were announced recently. So could you tell us a little bit more about where the companies are, especially the ones that are in the hospitality business? Are they ready for this challenge? Are they ready? And what are the key takeaways from your survey? And also perhaps tell us a bit more about your position paper.
Okay, sure. I'll try to walk you through all of that. So chronologically, what we did at the Chamber of Commerce here, which represents about 200 Swedish companies that are present in Hong Kong, and they're various size. They're large, big corp companies. There's also SMEs and entrepreneurs in creative industries, so industrial, manufacturing. So our chamber represents all of those companies. And each year we'll do a business climate survey that we conduct to really see what is the business climate and what's the perception right now. And so when we did it last year, it was in the middle of the pandemic. So this was the first time we actually reached out to a large group of them and to really see how are they impacted, how are they handling it, and what were their perception of doing business in Hong Kong right now. And what we saw was that, as in probably all other markets, many of them were really hardly hit by the pandemic, especially if you are in retail and hospitality, which is all these consumer-facing industries. Those companies were definitely hit very hard. If you have a retail shop and you have to close it down, obviously that impacts your revenue directly. But then also that these many of the large companies, they were present in different countries as well. So that even though at that time in the beginning of last year, Asia was hit a bit earlier, then we could see that actually the global impact of it, even though then Hong Kong recovered from those first waves, it started to spread throughout other regions of the world, and how that also impacted the whole value chain and supply chain, because that reduced demand for then the manufacturers or the sourcing companies that were based here. So it's really a chain of reactions. And then another highlight of that survey was that we did see a huge increase in companies that said they were working actively with sustainability. So when we did that survey the year before, 2019, was about 65% of companies said that they were working actively with sustainability in either their business model or in their strategy. In 2020, that was 80%. So 4 out of 5 Swedish companies, Hong Kong, saying that they're working actively with sustainability. And we asked a follow-up question. So those who actually worked with sustainability, does it actually impact company profitability, or is it, a side activity? And we were very happy to find that majority of those companies who said they were working with sustainability also had it linked with profitability and linked with their financial performance. So it's really becoming integrated into the business. So that is really positive to see. At the same time, though, they did see that in Hong Kong, there was a lack of government agenda or government leadership to drive that sustainability agenda. And that is a very quite a big difference if you compare to in Sweden, for example, where the government is using policies and regulations to really push forward in terms of sustainability, and it's easier for companies to follow, and that also creates new business models and business ideas. But then in Hong Kong, that's not as advanced. So that's why the companies here see that, definitely more public awareness and public education is still needed. And then, fast forward a few months later, we saw that the European Union launched the Green New Deal, very progressive with a clear sustainability agenda as a growth strategy to recover the European economy after the pandemic. And many other countries did that as well. And then, so we thought that it will be very relevant for Hong Kong to also have a green economic recovery agenda. And so we use that as, and also the Swedish angle, because Sweden has long been a country that has had sustainability on top of the government agenda, committed very early on to become carbon or climate neutral by 2045, which is earlier than what was committed in the Paris Agreement. And since 97, actually, the Swedish government and the Swedish economy has decoupled from greenhouse gas emissions. So done it in a really good way, where we as a country have a track record showing that we can increase GDP per capita, become more prosperous, but at the same time lower the greenhouse gas emissions. So having leadership in all these different areas, there is so many good practices to learn from Sweden that could be applied here in Hong Kong. So with that angle, we thought it will be really important for not only Hong Kong, but the whole world to reset now after the economic downturn, and use this, not crisis, but see this as an opportunity to really transition the economies to more a low carbon dependent one. And green recovery, the definition of it per se, maybe I should explain as well what that means. Usually during an economic downturn, governments will do what they can to stimulate the economy with reforms, with different policies, injecting money in different industries to make it grow, make the economy grow again. And also all those jobs that were lost, they will try to create jobs again in new industries and sectors. Some governments will usually then invest in infrastructure projects, and use different relief measures for different industries. So that's what the governments are all doing. But the point with the green recovery is that while you're doing that, making sure that all these stimulus and economic measures are as green as possible. And also, while investing in infrastructure, why not invest in clean, green infrastructure, in clean energy, in renewable energy? And at that same time, use this as an opportunity to really transform the economy. So that is the point. And also create jobs. Jobs really need to be created in all sectors, but then why not then focus on the more forward-looking ones, so that we're not going back to what we used to be, polluting and letting out a lot of emissions, but having it difficult to change.
So what do you think would this carbon target recently announced by the Hong Kong government will mean for the hospitality industry and businesses here in Hong Kong, given the current state of the policies and maybe the business environment? Obviously, you know much better about the Swedish companies here, but maybe you can just in general introduce us what this kind of commitments mean. Do we see any trend, what it meant maybe in Sweden for these companies? What should they expect is going to happen next?
I would say the carbon neutrality target that was announced in Hong Kong during the policy address in November was definitely very welcomed. It has such a huge symbolic value when the chief executive and the government make such a clear commitment. And that is something that was needed here in Hong Kong, to have, first of all, the government commitment, because many other governments were doing that in line with the Paris Agreement. They have all signed and committed that they will try their best, do whatever they can to maintain the increase in temperature. So definitely very welcome. And then that really then creates opportunities. And the government also said that they will update the climate action plan. They would launch a blueprint on waste management, which was launched last week, not too long ago, and also that they will roll out a new strategy blueprint for electric vehicles. So those are really welcome. So we're really looking forward to that. What this really means is that, well, that is the first step to take as a government, to be committed to this. The next step then, what we would like to see as well, what was done in Sweden very early on in 2017, they legislated this commitment into the law. So the Swedish government is bound by law right now to achieve their carbon neutrality goal. And in the European Parliament, there's a process right now as well to legislate these commitments. And what it really does when you legislate it is that it gives the market this long-term commitment, and that creates the long-term conditions that is needed for both business and society to make the transition needed. And I really think the market needs the long-termness in this to really see that it pays off. Making investment today, you need to be sure it pays off in the long run, right?
Right. Thank you so much. I think we also have seen that with other conversations, especially related to the charging scheme, the waste charging scheme. So we have heard that if there is no policy on charging for waste disposal, then lots of companies don't feel the commitment to do so or to pay for this service to, say, providers or voluntary schemes. Lots of them will not voluntarily go and find solutions to their waste problem to be managed better, because there is no incentive, or there is no really a policy that sort of mandates it or somehow puts in perspective, like this is the cost that you have to pay extra for every kilogram of what you waste, etc. So I think the policy tools are really important. So I think hopefully we will see more action besides the sort of position and the pledge by the government, maybe with more policy tools being implemented to achieve the goal quicker and to have more incentive for the industry to jump on it faster. I think Swedish companies are probably an exception, because as you said, Sweden is so much ahead in implementing these, and it's in the culture. So these businesses are bringing this culture to Hong Kong, which is also good, because then they can be an inspiration to others. Definitely. And that's also my second question. Yeah. So we know that Sweden is at the forefront of driving sustainability already, but are there any examples related to the hospitality industry that you could mention or highlight, maybe here in Hong Kong even, that we could learn from, how to drive better sustainable practices?
Sure, I'm very happy to share. And I have to go back to the government again, because what the Swedish government also did last year in the middle of the pandemic, when it's really important to think about what is our long-term strategy for economic growth and what do we want for our societies. So last summer, the Swedish government adopted a circular economy strategy. So imagine as a government, you say that for our country, we have a national strategy for circular economy. And that it's based on the principles of maximizing the resources that we have and minimizing the waste, right? And also that they are ensuring that environmental policy is not separated from other policies, but integrated in overall, so that it becomes a functioning whole as a whole. And I think that was a brilliant thing for the government to do as well, set a really good example. And then in January, so 1 month ago, they launched an action plan where they really detailed what they were doing. So they are prioritizing different kind of areas or materials. So that will be plastics, textiles, food and beverage, bio-based materials, the built environment and properties, and innovative metals and minerals. So focusing on these, what can we do to maximize our resources and minimize waste? And I think it's a very brilliant thing to do. And they narrowed down detailed, very specific measures of each industry and also for each target, how to achieve them. I can give one example. So the government right now is evaluating whether it's possible to introduce a passport for products. So imagine the current labels that we have that describe the ingredients, the materials in it, and so on. Imagine you have a label, but not only the label, you have some kind of a passport or instruction book that explains what to do with the product, to get it, how to get it repaired, how to recycle it, or where to hand it in for second life use. And really integrating that to all the products that it's sold with the information that consumers can use, learn from them, in order
This will
to
be.
prolong the
Mhm.
life of the products.
And are these are the products that are imported to the country or also produced within the country? So there will be like an assessment made for these products?
So yeah, so the government right now is evaluating how to do this. Because in many
Mhm.
countries, there are requirements on labeling. You need to, nutrition for food is a requirement, or if you have electronic appliances, there needs to be instructions and warranties and certifications and so on. So this is something that the government can do and take leadership on. And so this is when you have a circular economy mindset and you're thinking one step ahead, right? Trying to minimize it already, and educating the consumers using all the different tools that are available. And then apart from that, if we don't only speak about government, but also look at consumer companies, I'm pretty sure you're aware of some of the Swedish consumer companies like IKEA and H&M, and many companies around the world. They have also set their own circular economy targets or circular business models. I think that is really also companies taking leadership in committing that we are going to, maintain our business, but we see this as a long-term strategy for our companies. So they set these as strategic goals, and that could be, in some cases, even more difficult because there are so many stakeholders and groups with different interests, and that is also requiring a big transformation in how the business is done. So, for example, IKEA, they said that by 2030, all products that they make will have to be reusable or recyclable. So imagine what kind of requirements that sets on already the design phase of the furniture. You have to design it with the mindset of making sure this product in the future is going to be reused, or make sure that it can be recycled. So how can you break different parts apart, or how do you make sure that the circularity is integrated into the whole design of the product. Likewise, H&M, they have said that by 2040, they will achieve a climate positive value chain, in addition to also source only sustainable cotton. So those are examples of when companies are also doing it, integrating it. A good example of what
Right.
I,
And I think
yeah.
I think this is really, just want to mention that this is really relevant also maybe as an inspiration for a lot of specifically properties and hotels where they would have the furniture. And we know actually for a fact that there are many times when hotels are refurbishing where all this furniture ends up nowhere at the moment because it's such a big amount of many rooms with a lot of furniture, especially in a place like Hong Kong. Where are you going to reutilize such furniture, for instance? So having that in mind when you are furnishing your property, hotel, or even restaurant will be quite important. Important learning. I think we could definitely draw a lot of learning from what IKEA is trying to do for the industry, specifically for that. And likewise with H&M, there's lots of textile that is currently not being tackled in the hospitality industry with regards to sustainability. It seems like it's very far away from what we think as hospitality industry, but we have to think about that hospitality industry is really something that is cross-sectoral. So it really touches upon almost everything. Is hotel, is buildings, so it's places where we eat, we sleep, we enjoy our free time, and it just kind of involves every aspect of our life. So I think there's lots of we can draw on I think there's still no like really much circular system yet in Hong Kong implemented, but I think that's what we really need to see in the recovery phase, to think about more in systems than rather than just disposing, because it's just not going anywhere. And I think the pandemic has also kind of exacerbated this single-use item culture, and we are having more and more waste, and we don't really know what is going to happen with it. I'd love to learn if you have any more examples about specifically hospitality industry, and or other examples that you think would be applicable in Hong Kong too.
Yeah, another one would be obviously plastic bottles recycling. And I know that is a big topic here in Hong Kong. We have really great initiatives like Drink Without Waste. That is really a coalition of different industry actors taking responsibility for and providing those facilities for recycling bottles and beverage and cans. So that is really very good examples of what can be done. How it works in Sweden in terms of plastic bottle recycling is that it's a deposit scheme. So when you actually buy a can of Coke, for example, in the supermarket, you pay a little bit more, like 50 cents more. And then when you return that can to the reverse vending machine that they have installed in almost all supermarkets, so it is a national, it is an infrastructure that exists everywhere. In every supermarket you will find them. You will then get that 50 cents back. So that is really a clear incentive, financial incentives for consumers to do it.
That's a great example. And as I mentioned, most of the hospitality industry businesses will be, inside a building. So building is such a prominent element that a lot of hospitality businesses will share. And we know for a fact that in order to combat climate change, we should really lower our energy consumption across the board. And in Hong Kong, 90% of the electricity used comes from the operation of buildings, actually. Now, the hard question, how can the hardest hit industry afford upgrading or retrofitting of their buildings to curb the emissions? We know that this is really a big challenge because the existing buildings that have been built a long time ago, implementing new technologies is pretty costly. And especially now, given the pandemic and potential economic impact on this industry, what would you say? What should be the recovery steps? How should they still sustain their strategy of being green or going green with limited budget, especially with regards to energy consumption?
You're very right on this part. This is definitely the key question. And my answer would be you need government subsidy here. And this is exactly where green economic recovery measure comes in. If governments subsidize retrofitting and renovating buildings, which has been identified actually as a low-hanging fruit by the International Energy Agency, because they say this can create a lot of jobs, retrofitting building, installing or upgrading the air conditioning, for example, that is very labor intensive. So that already in itself creates a lot of jobs opportunities. At the same time, it can yield very quick returns or economic returns in both in terms of having the efficiency benefit, but also lowering the energy costs for the property owners or for the users. So really, this is a very, very low-hanging fruit for where government subsidy can achieve both aspects of creating jobs and also becoming more or less dependent on electricity and energy. And especially since in Hong Kong, the buildings here consume such a big portion of the electricity. Just there's so much to gain from just implementing and doing such a measure. So you're really definitely spot on this.
If you we have heard some really good examples from our partners in the hospitality industry who own big properties and hotels. When they actually did retrofitting of some of their chillers or air cons, they were actually, I think, able to lower their consumption of electricity by 50%. that's a hopping number. So it's massive, and obviously it had financial implications. But if you factor in the cost, there were of course not 50% drops in what they had to pay for the electricity before, but there was definitely a saving in terms of financial resources as well. So I think those examples are really great, and we are hoping to share more of those examples in the near future. We're currently working on some case studies, so hopefully we will be able to share, encourage more people to do that. And I think another strategy that the businesses could actually implement is so-called green revolving fund. So that's a sort of a system where you can think about the investment as a fund. And you essentially can imagine that you will have some financial savings from implementing this new technology, and with whatever you would essentially save every month, you will be paying back the sort of a loan. So some technology companies are already offering this to their customers because their technology is too expensive. So essentially, you're almost getting a loan. There is no upfront cost for the company to implement a new technology, but essentially they just keep on paying the same bill for electricity for the next 3-5 years until they actually pay off from the difference between what their cost would normally be and what the actual cost is, because it's lowered by implementing new technology. The difference is committed towards repaying for the technology installation, which I think is also quite a smart system. And so if there's anybody in the audience who is listening and is from a supply chain, I think that's something to think about if it's possible. Maybe also an avenue for the government to not maybe just subsidize the industry itself, not the hotels only, but maybe these technology companies, and help them to bring their product through this scheme to the customers. So it's easier. There doesn't have to be like a big commitment or taking up a loan and whatnot in order to implement the technology.
Yeah, you're right. It definitely has to do with looking at the business case of installing a new technology that you would know is efficient or going to lower the cost in the long run. But then as the property owner or the building owner, you need to put up with the upfront cost, right? And then you need to motivate that investment upfront. But then the business case of it, what you actually should do is to look at it from a life cycle perspective and look at the life cycle analysis or life cycle cost, not only the upfront cost of installment, what it costs today, but also looking at the potential of lowering those operational and running costs over the period of time that you will actually use the technology. So if you calculate on that, it could significantly lower the total lifetime cost of that installment or that technology than it would be to install something that is cheaper today, but then is going to break down in 10 years already. And then throughout those 10 years, it's not going to be as efficient if it comes to like an air condition, for example, and it's going to drain a lot of energy during these 10 years instead of installing something today that is slightly more expensive, but then could, for example, there's Swedish companies that have technologies for AI sensors that can regulate the indoor climate automatically so that it always maintains a good temperature indoors, and also you don't waste any energy of being too cold. I always think it's too cold inside in the summer here in Hong Kong, and then during the winter, there's no heater, so it's not warm enough. So being able to balance that out, you can also save so much energy cost. So this is really about the business case for building owners. Look at the life cycle of it and not the upfront installments and costs. But still,
Right.
that is upfront. You would need, and not the least, cash to be able to do it. And government subsidy could definitely help out here. As an example, they did this in Japan. Actually, the government there, in their own economic recovery plan, they did have a specific section where they did target retrofitting buildings exactly in this way. So we do see that this is something other governments in Asia is doing.
Right. I see that we have one question from the audience,
Yeah.
and I think it's related to the policy and how motivate maybe the policy and then businesses. So I'm going to just read it out. And so TEC is asking, thank you for sharing insights with us, Anna. So I have a question. The Germany-led green economic recovery was partly driven by a joint statement by close to German 70 companies calling for the stimulus they receive to be aligned with green transition. Do you think similar initiatives can be made by companies or chambers of commerce here in Hong Kong, especially since 80% plus companies in SwedCham's 2020 survey said they were either tackling or interested in tackling the climate change? Do you think there is sort of like a power that, say, the hospitality businesses would have to also, voice their wish to the government that, they would like the stimulus or the recovery financial resources to be invested in a green recovery specifically, and sort of stimulate faster implementation of certain policies?
Yes, I certainly hope so. I definitely think that companies coming together has a very strong force to be able to change. And all these initiatives are really welcome if companies can lead and push the regulation ahead of them, lead by example, and have different proof of concept and saying that this actually works. As Drink Without Waste, for example, that initiative that is also driven by the private actors and market participants. I think that is really, really very essential. And it's really great to hear that it happens in Germany as well. In Sweden, there's many different industry associations, and also all the government agenda is built on the foundation of that the business, the private sector and academia is part of it. So there is this triple helix model where there will always be, in different initiatives, always have a government representative, a private actor representative, academic representatives. And this is the foundation of how you can make a wider societal change to have everyone on board. It has to be holistic, right? And it's very also here in the Hong Kong context, very specific to the market here, that it's mainly driven by strong market participants, and where the government has been very hands-off, have had a very hands-off approach to enable this free economy to exist. So I think that comes with the legacy of that they are maybe not as keen on introducing different regulations and measures or policies as other governments do. So that in that case, definitely, there is an opportunity for the stock market and for the investor market to take leadership. And we do see that in Hong Kong, where from the investment side and from the financial regulators, they're saying that all the listed companies need to start disclosing the sustainability reports and ESG factors. And so that comes from the financial market side and the push to advance in terms of sustainability. So I definitely think there's different market aspects and different contexts, but there will always be possibilities to move forward. So I'm optimistic.
Thank you. I also encourage anybody in the audience who would have any questions for Anna to put them in the chat. Anything that you'd like to know more about either the survey or even the position paper that the Swedish Chamber of Commerce has published, feel free to ask. I still have some questions here, and I'm going to circle back a little bit to the climate change, and then we are talking about green recovery. So in order to tackle climate change, we already talked about the energy, but also one of the aspects is the waste management and how we manage waste. And you already touched upon a little bit the circular economy system and how Sweden is exploring how to incorporate this model from a legislation point of view. And so, but I would like to go back to the waste management. And we just had this paper published, the blueprint published on the waste management and how it's going to look like in Hong Kong. And we also know that there are some good case studies around Asia, some success stories, specifically countries like South Korea, that are quite successful with their waste management system. And that does reduce a lot carbon emissions, obviously, especially when we think food waste and the emissions and gases created in the food decomposition process, but also just like the virgin resources and materials that are used for producing things that we throw away eventually, that has a massive impact on carbon footprint. So obviously, implementing these principles of circular economy are crucial to really achieving the carbon neutrality. And I'd like to know what do you think that with the most recent developments around the Hong Kong's waste charging scheme, how can the hospitality industry be convinced essentially of doing their part, even without a policy in place, to implement the circular models? Because as I said, lots of them just feel like this is a cost on my balance sheet. So from a business perspective, lots of leaders that decide on the budgets will be, we are not going to do anything that is extra cost. So how can we actually implement this, still be on track with the green recovery, going to carbon neutrality, meeting these targets that government has announced, while there is no policy instrument in place and we don't know when it's going to come back or not because it's being shelved right now? So how can we motivate the hospitality industry? How do you maybe do it with your in Sweden or with the Swedish companies here to motivate them to actually still invest in this or to be part of that and thinking about circular system?
Yeah, well, that is a very complex question, definitely, the waste charging in Hong Kong and the topic itself, how difficult it has been to get it approved, and how the government has been trying for many years, and how now, right now, it is very unclear what is going to happen. I think from a more broader perspective, a waste charging scheme implemented in different countries and different markets and places around the world have mostly been proven effective as measures to reduce waste. So we know that it works, and so how to do it is the challenge, right? And obviously, perhaps in Hong Kong especially, the appetite for such a waste tax is quite low, since it is a very low tax environment overall. So any introduction of anything that can lower the disposable income or disposable money of different actors is not as welcomed. So from that point of view, I'm not an expert who knows how to solve this, but I do believe that in terms of waste management, the market or society won't be able to regulate itself, because it's one of those, I believe, public goods where the government needs to step in as an actor to take control of it, and also to, with the cost that it has to, need to incur to provide that overall infrastructure for the whole society. And then, what to do if the government is not doing that? Yeah, it's really difficult, because each company, each actor can take their own responsibility and say that we try to reduce as much waste as we can. We try to live zero waste or be a zero waste company. But at the same time, if not all your competitors are doing the same thing, that will create some kind of a first mover disadvantage for you. You're losing out when they don't have to, when no one else has to do it. So again, having a level playing field for all actors is crucial in that sense. Another way to look at it, I don't know if that can help here, but in the waste blueprint that was now launched by the government, they did for the first time actually commit to zero landfills by 2035. And this is something that I saw as something positive, because landfills is an acute problem in Hong Kong. They're filling up by the day and by the minute. And there's been a lack of a long-term strategy for a long time. So seeing that right now they do commit to a target of having zero landfills by 2035, that is already very positive and a big step, I would say. They're in the right direction. And how to do that is going to be, along a difficult journey of reducing waste. And now the government is also in that blueprint saying that they will invest more in the waste to energy facilities. So turning waste into energy and seeing it more as a resource. And this is the kind of mindset that I think is very, very important. So just to give you an example, Sweden is a global leader in waste to energy area, and almost 99% of household waste today is either recycled or recovered as energy for district heating and electricity. So the municipal waste that goes to landfill is almost non-existent. It will be the residuals of all the other waste facilities and incinerators. So with that kind of a mindset, you will see that you will know and how to recover more energy, and how can you use those waste as a resource. So that is a very important step. But in order to achieve that, you really need to educate the public on how to separate the waste at the source of it, so that already when the waste is generated, it can be separated and be made, and to be sent to the best use, whether it's going to be recycled or burned as fuel or energy or recovered in any other way. So that really requires to take the overall responsibility and see the whole value chain of it. But there is definitely a lot of potential here. Yes, I think that will be my hope, that there will be ways of reducing it. And right now we do see government taking steps in that direction.
Yeah, I think there have been, especially over the last year, the green shops popping up and certain infrastructure being put out there. So it seems like there are things moving. They're definitely moving quite slowly, but I think there is a big hope. And we also see quite positive response from the industry. So I'm also thinking just maybe making their voices heard, or the actions that they do in terms of to reuse their waste would be quite important too, because I think we don't necessarily hear about how many of these even small F&B businesses are trying to reduce their waste, and they're doing it voluntarily. There's lots of committed people even in Hong Kong, but we don't necessarily see them. And I think just having that and having them positioned as leaders might encourage the others to understand that this actually does bring a value. This is actually something positive. We actually have a really success story with one of our partners with whom we trialed composting, because typically all these separations and composting are seen as like additional burden and additional sort of work for the employees, and therefore lots of businesses would be reluctant to do that. But essentially we did a trial with one of our partners where we asked them to collect their food waste that they never did before, and there's for just one day, because we wanted to trial it, pick it up, measure how much they had in one day of the waste. And then their manager came back to us next day and was ecstatic about how their staff was so proud to do that, and they just started doing it voluntarily next day, and they just wanted to start separating the waste. So many times they also think this is like a burden and our employees won't want to do that, but actually they were very motivated, very keen, and they felt more affiliated with the brand and with the employer, because it made them feel good about the job that they do, or even just displaying the data and helping the different players understand like how much you're actually helping or saving of resources, how you're contributing in a positive way is very, very important. We don't see these numbers, we cannot come up with them or understand them very naturally. So actually having this communication, much better involvement and engagement, I think it can be actually positive for the businesses to retain their staff and motivate their staff if they do so. And I think highlighting this kind of cases would be really important for others to kind of be motivated and see a value in it. Besides just the monetary value, there are other values that you're creating for your business with doing so.
Yeah, definitely. What a good example of behavioral change from a company perspective.
Yes, and we're very positively surprised about it, but it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, and what they usually say, what gets measured gets done. So if you don't measure it, it doesn't get done. It's always such a good way to make yourself aware of how much waste you're generating. Isn't even for us as individuals. If we don't measure it ourselves, we don't know how much it is. And then when you start highlighting it, you start think about it. That is when you start changing behaviors.
As well, exactly. Well, I've got one more question, but I would like to invite, if there's anybody in the audience who would have any question for Anna, then feel free to type it in now, because we will have to wrap up quite soon, and we have just a couple of minutes left. So feel free to put it down. We're going to share with you also from this talk the SwedCham position paper with you, the link. So if you're interested to read that, we will share it in a follow-up email. And I've got still one more question. So there are some opposing opinions on whether or not the subsidies from the government could really drive green recovery and prosperity for people at the same time. In fact, many point out that if we want to curb the emissions, we need to consume less and therefore slow the economy, which would result in fewer jobs and hence worse conditions for some populations. So to wrap this discussion up, what is your view on that, on those pessimistic views, or or those people who are not really aligned with what we think the green recovery will actually bring?
Yeah, very, very good to also point out, of course, that there are different views on this, but overall, the main point of a green recovery is that when governments are already stimulating the economies, they can stimulate the economies with the purpose of creating jobs, creating business opportunities. They can do that in the most green way as possible. So one does not exclude the other. It is not saying that consumers should consume less to slow down the economy, but it's rather diverting the resources to the right purpose. So instead of investing in a new coal power plant, you can invest in wind power plants instead. It's that kind of a choice to make. It's not about taking something away from one group and makes it that it's not a zero-sum game. That's what I'm trying to say here. And there's then another example from also the hospitality industry that I think the French government did really well. The governments are bailing out airline industries right now, airlines, because they cannot fly and they have basically no source of income. So when the French government bailed out Air France, they also attached climate conditions to it. So not just giving you a bag of cash and money, but also saying that we're giving you this, but at the same time, you have to lower your emissions and you have to become more efficient in terms of using your energy, lowering your fuel, and so on. So that is a really good way of combining it, because governments will be bailing out and giving money to industries as they already are, but doing that in a very responsible way and implementing the kind of change they want to do at the same time. That is really where the green recovery comes in so well, because it creates a win-win for both the economy, for the society, and for the environment, for everyone.
Right. Do we have any questions for Anna? If anybody feels like they would like to chip in, it might be a little bit more on the policy level today, but I think it's really important to understand the context also for the businesses in the hospitality industry, because these policies are impacting the business practices, and also to understand the power that we have, or as the business community has, in terms of maybe shaping these policies and voicing their opinion and their wish to the government, especially in Hong Kong, as you rightly pointed, is that, if the government will listen to the business community's opinions and will do as the community sort of kind of wants or shows the interest in. So I think we've got, we don't have many questions today. The audience is very quiet. They just love listening to you, but I'll wait for a bit anyways. And if there are any questions later on, obviously you can find Anna probably through other networks like LinkedIn. So feel free to connect. I'm sure that she's going to be very happy to hear about your stories, or if you have any interesting business examples. And we will share with you, obviously, the position paper as well. And before you would drop this talk today, please feel free to fill out the survey for us. Especially, you can also tell us what kind of topics you would like to hear about in the future, what kind of issues are there that we should talk about, or whom should we invite for the next talk. So feel free to provide that. Your insights are super valuable. And our colleague Carrie has already shared the link here in the chat as well. And I'm still waiting for those questions, but audience is really shy today. Sometimes we have tens of questions and we don't even have time to respond to them. But if there are no more questions, I'm just going to wrap up, because lots of you are going to enjoy your pre-Chinese New Year dinner with your families, or maybe even cooking right now. Yeah. So if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to really thank Anna and all of you to be here today with us to really hear interesting topic of the green recovery and the policy and the hospitality industry sort of impacts. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And I'm wishing everybody here a very nice Chinese New Year celebrations, either with your family, friends, or in the nature, or whatever you'd like to do. Thank you, Anna, for joining us.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you to Green Hospitality and the audience for this session. Yeah, so I will also reiterate that and wish you all a very happy New Year. Enjoy the New Year's Eve dinner with your friends or family, and enjoy the long weekend now with the holiday. So take the chance to go out into the nature, enjoy the beautiful environment that is available for us here in Hong Kong. So with that, thank you all so much.